Hi everyone, I'm GW3D. You may know me for pyrography. What I've got on my desktop background right now, which is my last piece that I've done, that's Darth Vader. He's burnt into wood. Not a lot of people can do that, I'm aware. It's okay. It's a skill. You build it up. Most of you are going to know me for that, but today's video is not going to be about that. Today's video is more going to be a cover letter for a localization copy editor job that I'm very interested in acquiring. And I want to show off my skills. I actually spent a lot of time reading, and that is what makes me a good writer, in my humble opinion. I've got a bookcase filled from the top to bottom with just books, fantasy books, and the other things that I've read. And in the reading of that, you learn a lot of the English language, and you learn what sounds good. Honestly, I'm just as confident in my editing skills as I am my pyrography skills. Actually, I'm a little more confident in my editing than my pyrography. And I know that my pyrography is pretty good. I mean, you're looking at it right now, so. Most of you guys haven't seen any of my writing. My writing tends to lead more towards erotica, therefore you won't see it on Twitch very much. Or, I mean, at all. You won't actually be seeing that on Twitch anytime, ever. Now they say if you really know something that you can teach it. So today what I'm going to attempt to do is teach some of the basics of the final parts of the writing process. The final parts of the writing process are your editing and proofreading. Now, I'm mostly doing this, like I said, to show off to a company that is currently hiring for localization editors. So I will be talking about my experience in making foreign translations flow into a more localized English. The primary goal is to make content more understandable and relatable to English-speaking customers so that an English-speaking audience will feel fully engaged with the characters. If you're unable to keep up with the speed in which I do my edits, that's okay. I don't want you to worry, because I have a 4-year degree in creative writing with minors in English. I spent 3 years on the editing staff of a literary journal. So some of the things that I catch and some of the things that I'm very fast at, you have to put years of work into editing to really catch it quickly, or as quickly as I do. And that takes time, and if you're not at that level, don't worry, you can build up to that. Also, as I'm doing the edits, which the plan is actually to do a little bit of live editing, maybe not on stream, I thought about doing it on stream, but it will just kind of show you the process of how my brain works while I'm doing edits. Now, sometimes I am going to miss a few things. Sometimes, if I'm in the middle of an editing process, you'll see me skip over something or gloss over it, and that may be intentional, because when I do this, I have a process. I will be looking for one specific type of problem through the whole thing, and I'll go through the whole thing looking for that problem. It means that what is going on in my brain is I have a mode of operating. I'm actually looking for a specific thing at once. You have to do this in waves. You've got to do it over and over again. And I might skip over the fact that, oh, okay, so there's something misspelled or whatever. That's not what I'm necessarily looking for right at that moment. Okay, let's start with some productivity tips. Okay, first productivity tips. Caffeine, sorry. You're gonna need it. Another thing that's really good for productivity is one of these. This is just a little timer. If I set this to 25 and then force myself into a 5-minute break at the end of it, I'm a lot more productive, because what ends up happening is I'll get really, really into editing, and before my brain can kind of get that fuzzy haze thing, the timer goes off, and it makes me have to get up and go and do something completely different. But the entire 5 minutes, my brain is trying to get back to where we were because I got interrupted. I'm like, oh, I need to go and finish this thing. Frequent breaks are even recommended by Oxford University for the Oxford method of editing. I don't want to sound like I'm completely reading off the Oxford PDF. We are going to take a look at that right now, though. You'll see the address at the top and the bottom here. I've got it scrolling on the bottom. This is their editing and proofreading guide. I want to take a look at this particular bulleted list later on. It does tell you pretty much everything that you need to know for a checklist if you've already been editing for a while. Now, editing overall involves a lot of analysis and a lot of critical thinking. Analysis and critical thinking are two areas that I actually excel at, even though I don't like to admit it. My analytical skills and my critical thinking and my editing skills are actually better than my woodworking and pyrography skills, and those you can actually see on the desktop in front of you right now. If you look, that is actually the Darth Vader that I burnt into that piece of wood. I used a hot wire loop system. It would be the same as if you took a light bulb apart. You get that filament on the inside that glows red, and you decided to just drag that across a piece of wood. That's what's going on right there with the Darth Vader. And it did take a long time to learn how to do that. It also took a long time to learn how to edit. I have more years of training and skills built up in the editing than I do in the pyrography. I've only been doing pyrography for about 4 years. I have a 4-year degree in writing, but I've been doing it since 2005, and I haven't really slowed up on doing writing. So when you're editing, you're going to look at a document for content, for clear expression. You want to make sure that it's logical, coherent, meaningful, and pretty much whole. And all of that is right out of the Oxford method that I just showed you. On your grammar, you're going to want to know how to diagram a sentence, and you're going to want to know what the different parts are. You know, you're looking for spelling, format, grammar, and punctuation, things of that nature. If you're getting a degree in English, you'll learn it a lot faster because you will have the guidebooks in front of you to kind of train your brain on how to do that. You'll want to make sure that the purpose of your writing is very clear. And you have to keep the reader in mind as well. Make sure that the reader is not just targeted, but that the writing itself meets the reader's needs. When you do look at these bulleted lists, They actually break things down very easily. You can actually go through your writing line by line with one of these bullets in mind. You'll go through your entire story looking for that bullet. And yes, this means that you'll go through everything over and over again, line by line. And some of these are a little easier. For example, the very first thing that you see on this particular bulleted list is only pertaining to the opening paragraph, but it wants to make sure that the opening paragraph provides clear indication of the purpose of the text, which is very important for getting your reader centered into where they need to have their mindset. If you can follow this format and do all of the things that are on this sheet, then you are starting off with editing on the right foot. Be thorough. It will be a slow process at first, and that is okay. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. If you're very thorough and slow in your editing the first few times, your brain will get faster and faster every time you edit. Now let's talk a little bit about understanding localization. So if I go to Google Translate and I say, what is hello in Spanish? It's going to give me an instant translation. If I click on 7 more translations, you'll see 7 more ways of saying the exact same thing. And each one of those maybe has a different connotation in that language. If I don't want Spanish, say I want Japanese. So now I'm seeing the Japanese translation. If you look, their language and ours is absolutely nothing alike. Now, I don't do this quite as much anymore, but I was a bit of a Japanophile for a number of years. Google Translate tools allowed me to navigate quite a few websites that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. The translation tools are always improving, like all the time, but they're also still far from perfect. One thing you might notice about most things translated from Japanese is that the language is stiff and formal, and it's also got a very strange rhythm to it. Because Japanese and English are not just 2 different languages, they're actually 2 totally different modes of thinking. The Japanese language is based more in the visual. Every single word has symbols drawn out to be more of a picture of what that item is, whereas English is actually based in sound and in rhythm. It is a sound-based language. It's got very little emphasis on the visual element of the language. All of the letters that you see in English translate to a sound. When you see an L in English, you know that you're going to hear the sound L. It doesn't have anything to do with what visually might be represented. Japanese, however, does that not look like a campfire or a pair of campfires? This is their word for fire, flame, or light, or blaze. It really looks like there is a smoking campfire with little cinders or something coming off of it. And when you look at the English, the word fire does not physically look like a fire, because every letter in that word represents a sound. It's a very audio language. Not to mention the cultural differences. For example, soap opera in English has nothing to do with soap, and it really has nothing to do with opera singing. So when you translate it to Japanese, they don't even have a Japanese word for it. Their Japanese word for it is melodrama, which, if you actually know English, you know to switch the R's to L's, and that's melodrama. It's an English word that they've adapted from us. Likewise, English doesn't actually have a word for kimono, so we stole the word from them. However, if you were going to try to translate this over to Japanese, we would see it as soap opera. Oh, it is going to do it automatically. Ha, cool. But eventually, it does turn into melodrama, if you just keep translating back and forth. And one thing you're going to notice about most things translated from Japanese is that the language is very stiff and formal, and it's also got a very strange rhythm, because English is based on iambic pentameter, which is everything that Shakespeare has ever written was in that format, and it just means that every word has a particular rhythm that goes up and down, unlike Japanese. And this is actually from a Korean website, but it's still translated, and is still from an Asian language, so you can kind of see some of the stuff on here. This is actually an advertisement for a job for another localization copy editor, and it is obviously translated without a localization copy editor to start with, but they're being super formal in the language structure that is in their native tongue. The first thing that's going to jump out at me is subject-verb agreement in plural. The other thing is going to be there needs to be a comma right here after video games, because this particular phrase itself is a descriptor for Webs in America. So if you break it down into the component parts, this says Webzen is looking for individuals to join its team as a localization specialist. The problem is individuals are not a localization specialist. So this should have been as localization specialists. These are the kind of things that let me know that this has not been looked at by a localization copy editor. Listen to how stiff this sounds. Edit for grammar, punctuation, spelling, style, and language-specific slang, all in-game text, web features, and marketing copies to be coherent, entertaining, and free of errors. There is nothing local about that sentence structure. This is actually 2 different thoughts. Now, it may be one coherent thought in the Japanese language or the Korean language, but in English, these are 2 different thoughts and require 2 different bullets. Another thing that a localization editor would have probably caught and fixed here is the word order. Review, proof, and revise as necessary all game-related editorial content. Okay, it's understandable, but it's also very choppy, which happens when you get a translation. What a localization editor would say about this would be proofread, review, and revise all game-related editorial content as necessary. Again, this is a word order issue. Provide bug correction support pertaining to in-game text. Now, of course, it's the copy editor's job to figure out a word that works locally for bug correction support. Quote bunnies. Which what we would end up saying is that you're providing QA testing. Now, set up and update game term bases unique to each game. Let's say that I'm in an RPG and I have an old lady character who really likes soap operas. Or maybe it says kick of 1,000 housewife melodramas, and that's the name of the attack. We're going to want to figure out in our head that we can change that to super soap opera kick. Or into something else that matches with the other attacks. That is what they're talking about when they say game term bases. And honestly, I'm better in Japanese than I am Korean, so there's no telling what kind of stuff is going to come at me from the kind of jobs that I might be getting in the future, because Korea's actually making some really good games lately.